This is a continuation of our tutorial series on SEM interpretation. As has been stated, our objective is to be able to evaluate enhanced irrigation devices to determine if they actually accomplish what they claim to accomplish, as well as determining the specific conditions under which they are able to accomplish it. So the path we've taken was to first look at issues with biomineralization process and to make sure we had a good understanding of the steps in that process, because it affects the lens through which we experience image perception and how accurately we interpret SEM images. Without that background, we would make many errors in analysis. Then we studied some of the factors in specimen preparation that can introduce artifacts that affect image interpretation and can lead to error. Then, thanks to Rick Schwartz's suggestion, in our last tutorial, we looked at some control cases where no treatment had been done and only virgin irrigation was done to gain some pattern recognition of baseline dentinal states. So as outlined in our original strategy, we thought it worthwhile to first look at several cases of conventional MIE instrumentation using conventional irrigation techniques as a kind of in vivo type of control, so we have something to compare enhanced irrigation to. So this is a more accurate flow diagram of our path, having developed some basic pattern recognition skills in studying dentin in an in vivo kind of environment. So after we look at Dr. Pushpak's conventional cases, then and only then will we look at the enhanced irrigation devices of laser and gentle wave, and perhaps some other devices as well. We can never eliminate error, but perhaps we can avoid making some amateurish mistakes. But first, I'd like you to review a paper I have placed in the MIE Google Group Drive. And if you go to the Pre-Dentin Lit folder, and in that folder is a PDF paper named Critical Appraisal of Smear. I suggest you read this paper. It outlines the shortcomings in many of the irrigation studies and basically says that almost all these studies are completely worthless. I agree with almost 100% with the findings in this paper. Basically, what the paper says is that in these studies, there is no longitudinal control of cases. And by that, they mean that if you don't know what was there before you opened and studied the case, you can't possibly claim to know what the irrigation protocol actually accomplished. As we have already seen in our virgin irrigation cases, there is tremendous variation in the status of dentin and pre-dentin, not only in different areas, but variation within singular areas. For me, this critique is practically uncontestable. For example, there is no assessment of sclerotic or irregular irritation dentin in these cases because you don't know it's there. And that's an unknown if you don't have a longitudinal control. And then they go over the very poor statistical control of the evaluators and the multiple mistakes made in how those evaluators are doing their assessment. And then there's the whole issue of bias. There's a tremendous amount of bias in SEM studies, and you want to be aware of the biases that you have, where to look, how closely to look, failing to look. I love the definition of what a mediocre scientist is, one that can always find what they're looking for. The good scientist finds what they are not looking for. So the whole issue of all of the cognitive biases we have looms large in image interpretation, and we will endeavor to minimize them as much as we can. So these are Pushpak's cases, and in the next tutorial, we're going to look at both these cases carefully and hopefully not make a lot of mistakes that are outlined in the paper